Today we're talking about Book of the Dead. Now, Book of the Dead is kind of an item that gets a pretty bad rep by most people. It's too expensive, doesn't bring the value that it should, or whatever. And I was wondering where this idea is coming from, and I figured, hey, why not just put this item in direct comparison to other items with similar stats, similar purposes in the game, and figure out how the stats are. I generally think that people misplace Book of the Dead a little bit in what it does and how it should be utilized, and as such, I think it's worth looking into this. In order to compare it to other items, I have created a table with all the stats of the specific items that are relevant here. The stats that we're talking about are the price of the item, the power that the item offers, the health value that the item offers, the lifesteal if it has any, the mana if it has any, the crowd control reduction, as this applies to quite a few items in this category, and if it has any other benefits, bonus stats or passive. We'll actually go through the items one by one. We'll talk about Book of the Dead last and just look at the other items that we can compare and see what they bring to the table. The first one is Wallach Sash. A Wallach Sash comes in with 2,650 gold, so a little bit more towards the expensive end of the spectrum. In addition, Wallach Sash has a major downside that none of the other items here have, and that is stacks. Wallach Sash requires 100 stacks to be fully effective, and those stacks are different from Book of Those, very important for the item actually, to get the full stats out of the item. And those stacks are not easily stacked. You can farm a lot of minions, or you can try to farm a lot of kills, but either way it will take you quite a while to get all the stacks. As such, when we're looking at the stats here, we first have to look at the base value and then what it increases to. The base value in this case is 50 power, it increases up to 110 power. Quite a solid amount of power overall, but not quite there when it comes to comparison to other items that are just power loaded, power heavy, power focused, especially with how many more power oriented items we have now. In addition, the item has 300 to 600 health depending on the amount of stacks. Last but not least, Wallach Sash has 400 mana. Not that much of an important stat in my opinion. It can do you some good early on if you need that extra mana, but generally not one of the most favorable stats out there. The next item we have is actually quite different. It is Bancroft Tailor. Now, Bancroft Tailor is the only item here that comes from the same tree as Book of the Dead. I do believe that Bancroft Tailor and Book of the Dead are not directly comparable because they fulfill very different niches in my opinion, but we'll do it for the sake of completion here, and we'll look at Bancroft Tailor as well. Bancroft Tailor is the cheapest item here with 2,300 gold. It has 100 power base, but the more health you lose, the more power it gets, up to 200. It doesn't have any extra health, but it does have lifesteal. It has 20% lifesteal right off the bat. It goes up to 40%. Now, this lifesteal can be very beneficial because it allows you to get some extra health that way, and certain gods, especially Hades, can make great use of this. At the same time, you have to keep in mind that most mages use AoE abilities, and for those, the lifesteal is divided by 3, so the lifesteal value that you get is a lot lower, and you're usually not going to sustain as much as if you had just extra health. There are exceptions, for example Hades in his ultimate, when you have multiple targets and they try to focus you down a little bit so you get more power and more lifesteal, but generally speaking, the lifesteal for mages shouldn't be a primary point of the item, though it is a nice additional benefit. The next item is Gem of Isolation. Gem of Isolation is here because it just fills a little bit of a different niche. It still has that health. It is an unstacked item around the same price range, and it brings in some utility. Gem of Isolation costs 2,700 gold. It has 90 power, 250 health, and 10% crowd control reduction. In addition, it comes with a 25% slow. Now, looking back at Wallach Sash, you will see that the power is quite similar. It's a 20 power difference when Wallach Sash is fully stacked. However, Gem of Isolation in return starts with 40 power more. So this 20 power shouldn't really matter all that much in most situations, and as such we can say it's around the same level. However, when it comes to health, Wallach Sash brings you more than twice as much health. The 10% crowd control reduction is nice, but then again, it won't matter that much in most situations, especially for a mage who usually gets bursted when crowd control is in place. The slow, however, is a very strong benefit that can kind of make up for the missing extra health on this item, because you can zone enemies longer, meaning you take less damage. The next item is Ethereal Staff, also 2,700 gold. The power is once again 90, we have made this comparison to Wallach Set and Gem of Isu already, so same thing here. And the health on this item is actually only 200. It does get a 20% crowd control reduction, which is a little more impactful, but still suffers from the same issue really. On most mages it won't do much unless they're already a little more tanky anyways. What it does have in return is 5% max HP as bonus damage every 10 seconds when hitting an enemy with an ability. Pretty long passive, but it gets its job done, I would say. It kinda has replaced especially Soul Reaver in the meta, simply because it gives you that extra health on top of the power, which most people consider the bigger benefit, especially towards late game where you want to look for some survivability along with your damage. What you have to keep in mind here though, is that it has only 1/3 of the extra health from Wallach Set. And this is quite important because different from Gem of Isolation, Ethereal does not come with any extra tools to keep the enemy away from you, so your survivability won't be drastically increased in any other way. And as such, I would say when it comes to survivability, it is probably the worst option out of those, except for maybe Bancroft Tailor, depending on the god. And that brings us to the item that we're looking at here specifically, which is Book of the Dead. Book of the Dead is a tiny bit more expensive than the other items here, and a fair bit more expensive than especially Bancroft Tailor. It comes in at 2,800 gold, so it's towards the luxury item section, and that is where it falls for most characters, I believe. It has 100 power, which puts it right in the field with the other items except for Bancroft Tailor with its passive. And it comes with 200 health, so just like Ethereal, which in itself is not that much survivability. On top of that, it also has the 20% lifesteal that we see on Bancroft's Talon and not on the other items. This is kinda tying in with the passive that this item has. If you lifesteal over your maximum health, then you get the extra health as a shield, which is up to 20% of your max health. Now, how much does this translate to? A mage around level 10-ish will have 1000 health, plus the additional 200 health from Book of the Dead, so if we want to make this very simple, very straightforward, it will be roughly 200 extra health. So, technically speaking, this item can have roughly 400 health around level 10-ish, or something like that along those lines. If we're looking at level 20, the shield should always be around at least 400 health in total, because your mage will have roughly 2000 health when you have this item in level 20. If you have more health than that, is obviously gonna be an extra bigger shield, but this should be your average here. Which is mostly down to the fact that most mages just don't build more than one health item, because that is the one health item you're gonna look for. One of the first arguments against this is obviously gonna be that the shield won't always be up. From my experience though, I can say that it's not all that hard to keep this passive up on later stages of the game. You will quite easily stack it up in 1 or 2 waves, and you will be able to stack it up better if you have more power, obviously. If you use basics instead of abilities, it can also help you stack it up better. But as you have a lot of damage late game, the lifesteal is gonna be significantly high, so it should not really be that much of a problem. And if you know that there's gonna be a team fight soon, you can obviously prepare for that by stacking up the shield. The moments where the shield really becomes weak and does not help you much is when you fall behind a lot and you're under a lot of pressure already, because then the enemy team will be able to not allow you to stack up the shield at all, and you will just constantly run around with no shield, meaning you kinda don't really benefit from that passive. And now let's quickly compare these stats. If you look at the extra health that we can get out of this, we're talking around 600 health. Which other item here has 600 health? Wallach Set. Wallach Set also has around the same power. It is slightly cheaper, but in return you have to stack it forever and ever and ever. So if you were to choose between Wallach Set and Book of the Dead, Book of the Dead would give you an immediate spike that lasts for quite a while when the opponent goes for Wallach Set. On top of that, Book of the Dead has 20% lifesteal, meaning sometimes you will sustain some more health in a fight, and you will be able to sustain between fights, which is also a nice benefit. You lose the mana, but once again, I would put this towards late game luxury items with a few exceptions, and as such, the mana won't be that important anymore. If we're looking at Bancroft's Tailor, things are a little different. Bancroft is significantly cheaper, which is a strong benefit for it. It has significantly more lifesteal in certain situations, and it has significantly more power. However, the overall survivability that you get from Bancrofts in most situations will be lower. Mages are not the ones that sustain a lot. They will get bursted, especially if you don't have extra health that allows you to survive longer in a team fight. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Bancrofts unless your name is Hades. Don't get me wrong, Bancroft is a great item, especially for AA mages or mages that generally benefit a lot from lifesteal, because it kind of has this trading perk to it, similar to an RC maybe in a way. But it works as such, and it doesn't work all too well against heavy burst. If you have a lockdown comp that doesn't allow you to get your abilities off in order for you to get the lifesteal, it's a problem as well. So there are a lot of situations where Bancroft doesn't really get its full efficiency. Gem of Isolation and Ethereal both have significantly lower survivability to them. Gem of Iso kind of makes up for it with the slow, but that's not equally beneficial for every single mage out there. It really depends on which character you're playing, with Book of the Dead kind of gives it a little more to everyone. In conclusion, I do believe that Book of the Dead can actually be a highly undervalued item in many situations, and that's the reason we've seen it being picked up in the SPL as well. Zero's played it on Chronos multiple times as the first item. I would probably, for most guards, put it more towards the luxury section, but there are a lot of guards, especially those who need a little bit more survivability, that can really utilize this passive in fights. As long as your team isn't pushed so far back that you can't reach camps and the waves anymore without dying, so in any situation where there's some sort of power equilibrium or you have a lead, I do believe that Book of the Dead is a great option, and I do believe that it especially replaces Wallach Sash in many of those situations, as it doesn't require the stacks and you just get this power curve ahead much quicker. That said, if you fall behind heavily or your character doesn't really benefit from having extra survivability, or the enemy team comp doesn't have much burst or lockdown in order to keep you from sustaining, then I do think it's not the greatest choice. Before we close this video off, I actually want to announce something. I'll be doing an Ask Me Anything AMA on the Smite forums tomorrow. The link is down below in the description, so you can head over there, ask your questions there. You can just use your normal Hi-Res account, so you don't need to create anything else. And you also have a chance to win some skins. The questions will all be answered in video format within the next days, and I will probably announce the winners for the skins there as well. So feel free to check that out. With that, thank you guys for watching. I hope this was informative. I hope this was insightful. If you enjoyed this content and you're not subscribed yet, I would much appreciate if you click the sub button and maybe the bell. It really helps me out. See you for the next one tomorrow, and I will finally get the video done that I've been working on so long, I hope. Fingers crossed. Duke Sloth, out.